What's up, guys? I'm back. It's Monday. Made it back from Tennessee. Back to the grind. Just a few things. I'm gonna try to do a vlog every day, just to kind of put content out there. I guess that's what you're supposed to do as a YouTube guy. Just to keep your audience interested. I'm gonna talk a little bit about college football. I was at Tennessee this weekend. Big loss to BYU when they thought they had the game in the grasp. Busted coverage allows BYU to kick a field goal to tie, and they win in overtime, double overtime. So it's rough. But the thing about it is Tennessee hadn't been good for a little while, and you got a new coach in there, Jeremy Pruitt, who's getting decent recruits. What it appears to, he's getting decent recruits all over the country, and he's stuck with he's married to a quarterback he probably doesn't want, but the only one with experience, in Guantanamo or whatever the hell his name is. But I think he's in the right path. I mean, yeah, you lost to Georgia State, which is a bad loss, and then you lost to BYU, which it is what it is. But I think it's a rebuilding process. I think a lot of coaches. I mean, you look when I was growing up, Florida and Tennessee and Michigan and Florida State and all those teams were the teams that were the teams to beat. And Florida had a fall off when Spurrier left and Zook and Muschamp and those guys came in, and they struggled, and Florida State struggling now, and Michigan, when they had Brady Hoke, they weren't very good. But it's all cyclical. It'll come back, I think, as long as Pruitt keeps recruiting well, and they'll get back. Will they get back to number one? I don't know. I mean, it's such a tough struggle now with all the competition, and it changes yearly. But I think that'll be all right. Everybody's not number one forever. Look at Nebraska. I mean, Nebraska was in the '90s was the best, best team around year in and year out when Tom Osborne, and they've fallen off, and heck, they lost to Colorado this weekend. So it just happens. I think once you get a good quarterback in there, you get your recruiting in there, I think Tennessee will be back to an 8-9 win team in a year or two. I don't think it's that big of a deal. South Carolina. After losing to North Carolina, everybody in the state wanted Ray Tanner on down fired. Ray Tanner, Muschamp, Robinson, McClendon, the whole nine, clean house. Well, fortunately for Muschamp, he didn't have to bench Bentley. Bentley gets hurt. Kind of works out good. You get to see your freshman quarterback against lesser competition, and they look really good this weekend. What does that mean going into Alabama? Not a lot. I think everything was slower this weekend. There wasn't a lot of pressure on him. He can make the throws, make the reads. I think in a Nick Saban defense, it's going to be a lot more tougher. And then on the flip side, defensively, what got exposed against North Carolina will get exposed again. And I'd imagine that Alabama probably scores a lot of points, 40, 50 points against South Carolina this weekend. I just don't think their defense is very good, or as good as we thought it would be. So I think the line came out at 22. I think it'll go up, and it feels like a 4-score game to me. Getting into the weekend action, Clemson, what can you say? They had their only test they'll have this year, and they passed with flying colors, especially on the defensive side. We knew what Trevor Lawrence and Etienne and T. Higgins and all those guys can do on offense, but defensively, to replace those starters on the front seven and still be dominant, really dominant against Georgia Tech, which isn't a very good football team, but also dominant against Texas A&M, who's got experienced linemen, an experienced quarterback. They look really good this weekend, and holding them to 3 points for 59 minutes. They did give up a little backdoor score there with a few seconds to go, but all in all, held Texas A&M in check. Really good win there. Probably breeze through the next 10 games, the ACC championship, and then play in the Final Four. They play Syracuse next, which is the most overhyped team that's been in a while. Everybody seems to think that because they beat Clemson 2 years ago with an injured quarterback, and then almost beat them last year with another injured quarterback, that Syracuse is a contender, and they're not. They're a solid 8-win, 9-win team, but they're not a contender for any kind of championship, ACC or otherwise. Georgia did what they do. LSU beat Texas this weekend in a shootout. Both of those teams Both of those teams talk about being DBU, defensive back university. They gave up over 850 yards passing. That's not indicative of being a DBU, but LSU finally has a vertical passing game, a good defense, front line. They might be something to reckon with in the SEC. Might give Alabama a run for their money. We'll see. Going down the list, Oklahoma, Ohio State did what they do. Notre Dame was off. Auburn, I don't think Auburn's very good. I think they beat Oregon on the national stage, but they're too inconsistent. I don't think Bo Nix, you can depend on him. The running game is only 3 yards to carry, and the defense is up and down. I think Auburn probably loses 3 games this year. Florida as well. I mean, they do win games, and they have won games over the past few years, but I just don't trust that team. They look real sloppy against Miami in week 1, and Felipe Franks, he wins, I guess, but it's ugly. Michigan really could have lost to Army. 50-yard field goal in the end of regulation. Not great. They get away with a win, but wasn't that pretty. On down the list, there's not anybody who really stands out. Syracuse gets knocked out the top 25, which is warranted. So does Nebraska. The back ends like Washington State, Boise State, Southern Cal, Virginia, a bunch of ugly teams. I really don't think you should have anything but the top 4. My opinion is top 4 with 2 alternates, and it pretty much stays the same. Alabama, Clemson, Alabama, Georgia. LSU moves up for that big win, but those teams are going to knock each other out. And then Ohio State and Oklahoma. That's the only 6 you got to worry about right now. Like I said, Alabama comes to South Carolina this week. A lot of hype over that 2010 game with Stephen Garcia that beat the #1 Alabama Crimson Tide. There's not near the experience, especially at quarterback or defense. This game is it's probably going to be ugly. And then we'll see where South Carolina fans go from there. You went from the lowest of lows to the highest of highs. And I think with Hilinski, you get Muschamp and his staff gets a little more graded on the curve. See how they play against Kentucky. See how they play against Missouri. You got to win those games against Tennessee. Get to 6, maybe 7 wins, and then you can, give yourself a couple years of leeway to see what Ryan Hilinski can do. The Carry-On Joiner's playing a good bit, but you really need to capitalize on your Brian Edwards, your Tavion Feasters, your Dowdles, because those are your seniors, and you really need to win right now. At least show that you're growing. You're lost recruits after that first game, so big week right here. But all in all, it's hard to tell right here. The cream of the crop is still undefeated, and Clemson will be #1 wire to wire to the playoff start. Alabama, we'll see. LSU maybe gives them a test, and Auburn's always tough. Oklahoma, Texas will give them a run for their money, and they could win. If they can play contained defense on Jalen Hurts, Texas could knock Oklahoma out of this thing. After watching Michigan, I don't think Ohio State has a game on their schedule they lose. They get in by default as usual. That fourth team is going to be interesting. We got Georgia who could win the East and maybe even lose to Alabama in the championship game and make it. And then you got a couple other teams right outside there. LSU and Alabama probably knock each other out. So we'll see. Good week so far. We'll see what this weekend holds right here. I'm interested to see what Florida does when they face somebody tougher. Michigan, Notre Dame. Notre Dame's got some. I think Georgia coming up. That'll be a test. That right there, knock one of those 2 out, pretty much of contention. So a lot of good games coming up. Right now, nothing really changes, unless somebody slips and falls. But I think even a slip and fall, the top 4 or 5 teams are so good they can overcome an injury or even a loss and still make the playoffs. So that's college football this week. I'll do NFL tomorrow after these Monday night games and see where they stand. A lot of disappointment this week. A lot of disappointing teams in NFL in the first week. A lot of bandwagons got broke down. So stay tuned. Tomorrow morning I'll have you a NFL review, and we'll go from there. We'll see what the world holds on Wednesday.